Yes.
Ned, thanks. You've probably seen these leaked remarks by Iran's foreign minister in an interview that he evidently did not think would become public for a long time. One of his key points was that the Iranian military, the IRGC, according to him, is basically calling the shots in Iranian foreign policy. So, does that give this administration any pause about Mr. Zarif as an interlocutor in the nuclear negotiations? He also seemed to suggest that Russia had been essentially trying to sabotage the nuclear talks during the Obama administration. Does that give you guys any concern about Russia's intentions? Do you believe that Russia is fully supportive of restoring the JCPOA and the larger process with Iran?
Well, I will start by saying, and you won't be surprised to hear, that we don't comment on purportedly leaked material. Of course, we can't vouch for the authenticity of it, for the accuracy of it, and so, of course, I'm not going to comment directly on what's on that tape, on that recording. The broader point is that with any negotiation, we don't have control of the internal decision-making process of our counterparts. In this case, through our partners, because these negotiations continue to be indirect, we're communicating with the officials the Iranian government has put forward to take part in these talks in Vienna. You mentioned the talks in the previous iteration when it comes to both Iran and Russia. For both of those, I would say there's a proof point here that we point to and that gives us some degree of confidence that there is potential here. And it's a JCPOA itself. Whatever the internal politics that were involved, whatever the geopolitical dynamic that culminated with the July 2015 agreement, we were able to negotiate successfully with Iran in the past in the context of the P5+1. It's precisely the context we're in now. Our focus today remains on determining through these indirect talks in Vienna whether we can do so again.
If I could just follow up on that, I understand you can't address the comments directly, but maybe you would find a way to help provide some context. There's been some criticism of John Kerry, who, according to Mr. Zarif, when he was Secretary of State, had spoken to Mr. Zarif about 200 Israeli operations in Syria, and Foreign Minister Zarif said he was astonished to hear about this. Can you say anything about whether John Kerry, as Secretary of State, was talking about Israeli operations in Syria that were not supposed to be discussed?
Again, this is purportedly leaked material. Can't speak to the authenticity, can't speak to the accuracy of it, can't speak to any motives that may be behind its dissemination. I would just make the broad point that if you go back and look at press reporting from the time, this certainly was not secret, and governments that were involved were speaking to this publicly on the record.
What's your understanding of what's going to happen this week in Vienna?
So in terms of what's next, Special Envoy Malley is returning to Vienna early this week. I expect as soon as tomorrow he will be on the way back to Vienna. We've completed 2 rounds of negotiations, indirect negotiations. Special Envoy Malley will be back on the ground with his team in Vienna to start a 3rd round this week.
How long will it last? You're not expecting anything to be finalized at this 3rd round?
Well, I think you heard from State Department officials last week that there remains a long road ahead of us. We expect it to be a long road at least. I think what I said last week remains true today, that we probably have more road ahead of us than we do behind us. But we'll just have to see what Special Envoy Malley and his team find on the ground in Vienna. Yes, Joel.
Kind of want to just reiterate my colleagues' questions, but with the preface that the Iranian foreign ministry appears to have said that the recording was by no means an interview or supposed to be an interview. It was part of a routine and confidential dialogue that takes place within the administration. So they appear to be confirming the authenticity of the tape, but saying that some parts are taken out of context. And so I then kind of wonder once again, as was asked here, one, do you see the Russians as a credible partner here in good faith, working to advance a common goal? And also then, as you engage with the foreign minister, do you see him as is the organizing dynamic here that this is somebody who you need to give talking points to go back home to manage pressures domestically, or is he somebody who is not a decision maker?
What I would say generally is that it is not for us to comment on any sort of political pressures that may be on Foreign Minister Zarif. What we are focused on is one thing and one thing only, and that is achieving and securing an agreement that verifiably and permanently prevents Iran from ever obtaining a nuclear weapon. Iran's possession of a nuclear weapon would not be in the interest of the United States. It would not be in the interest of our European partners. It would not be in the interest of the Chinese. It would not be in the interest of the Russians. And so, as you reiterated the previous question, I would again point to the fact that we were able to achieve the JCPOA in 2015 and implement it in early 2016 with this same set of partners, the P5+1. And I think that speaks to some potential possibility of us being able to do this again if we find that commitment on the Iranian side, and that remains an if, and we've been speaking to that in recent days. But when you ask about the Russian motivation, I'm going to let the Russians speak for themselves. I would just add the point that a nuclear-armed Iran is not in Moscow's interest.
One more on Iran, unrelated to this though. Last week, Iran was elected to the Commission, at ECOWAS, and to the Commission on the Status of Women. How did the U.S. vote?
I'll have to get back to you on that. Yes.
A question from a colleague who couldn't be here today on China. She says, what is the Biden administration's view of, does it agree with the previous administration that the policy of engaging China to spur liberalization was misguided? And how does the Biden administration look at engagement now, broadly speaking?
Right. Well, we have spoken broadly to our approach to Beijing. And what we have always said is that it is a relationship that is multifaceted. It is a relationship that will have competitive elements. It is a relationship that will have adversarial elements. And it is a relationship that will have some cooperative elements. When you look at the totality of that relationship, and it is quite an expansive bilateral relationship, on balance, it is a relationship that is predicated on competition. Our goal in not only engaging with Beijing, but also with our partners and allies, and also here at home, harnessing our domestic sources of strength, is to be able to compete and ultimately to outcompete with China. This is an approach that, while it has human rights at the center, it is not an approach that requires any rose-colored glasses about the nature of the PRC, the nature of its leadership. We are focused first and foremost on competing with and outcompeting the PRC, and that's what we're doing, calling upon those sources of strength, our allies and partners, our values, our domestic sources of strength, to use them in this relationship that is fundamentally one of competition.
Do you think that the previous policies of engagement were misguided?
I'm not going to speak to previous administrations. I'm going to speak to this administration's approach, and that's precisely our approach. It is a clear-eyed, principled approach to the PRC that recognizes competition at the center of that relationship. We can have time for a quick final question. I know we're running to another engagement.
Just follow up on that. So by stressing this competition, this clear-eyedness, no rose-colored glasses, you're basically saying you don't expect China to change. When a special envoy Kerry goes there, he's not going to change in China's energy policies. When our trade officials go there, they're not going to get a reform in China's economy. Is that?
No, I'm not saying that at all. And in fact, I said at the outset, it's a relationship that has competitive aspects, adversarial aspects, and also cooperative elements to it as well. When you think about the those areas of shared interest that we have. You named a couple of them. Climate, of course, is one. Secretary Kerry was just in China several days ago, and you saw the joint statement that emanated from that visit. Non-proliferation is another one. Iran, we've talked about in this context already, is another one. There may be others as well. And so we certainly do hope and expect that we'll be able to achieve progress vis-a-vis all of those priorities, not because it's in the PRC's interest, but because it's in our interest. It's in our interest to see the world's largest emitter curb its emissions, and it's in our interest to see Beijing play a productive and constructive role, as it has in the context of the P5+1 with Iran. It's in our interest to see other cooperative aspects of this relationship be furthered. But what I'm saying is that at the core, we recognize this to be a relationship predicated on competition. And our goal throughout is to compete and to call upon our sources of strength to outcompete with Beijing going forward. Thank you all very much.